Welcome to the Recover You podcast. I'm Kylene.
And I'm Patrick.
We are a couple in recovery
from sex addiction
and betrayal trauma. Together, we share our story to encourage you on your journey. It's here that we talk about sex addiction, betrayal trauma, mental, emotional, and physical health, faith, and anything and everything needed to recover you to your most authentic self that God created you to be. Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of Recover You.
Yes. Hello.
This is going to be a much more upbeat episode, I think.
I think so,
don't you, Patrick?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we got some really good news on Friday. Your ultrasound was negative according to the oncologist. He had no concerns. He or she? She. Had no concerns, and so we feel much better. That was a
relief. It was a hard week.
Yeah, I actually didn't realize how much I was like holding all that in, and so Friday night I was like exhausted, and Saturday I was pretty tired.
Oh
too,
man, yeah, we had a stressful week because of that, and then a very busy weekend, and so we were very, very glad when the news came back. Yeah. So, yay! And thank you for everyone for thinking of me. I really
those
appreciate it.
Send notes and stuff like that. That was really nice.
Yeah. So I'm very, very relieved. Don't know why. I don't know. Maybe I had an infection or something, and my lymph was doing what it was supposed to do. Who knows? So
who knows?
Hopefully that self-resolves. But today we're going to go back to sort of a normal episode. Are you excited? And everybody listening goes, oh, thank goodness. All right. So we were thinking that what we would discuss today, and I don't have like a snap. I'm going to have to think about the title. I don't have a snappy title ready. But the idea that we're going to discuss is essentially what addicts can expect going through withdrawal, specifically when you're talking about porn and sex addiction.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of times people... It's interesting, I think, in the recovery community, because a lot of people will get to the point where they believe that it is an addiction, but then they don't necessarily, it's almost like there's this real like disconnect. Like alcoholism is like so different, and it is in a lot of ways, right? But the idea that we're going to be sort of talking about is like you still go through withdrawal. And I think that sometimes people maybe forget that or don't think about that or aren't aware of it. They're just like, well, it's a computer thing, or I don't know. You know, it feels different to people, I think. And I probably would have said the same thing. I think when I started learning about it, I was like, wait, what? You know? So we want to talk about that for a couple reasons. One, I think education around what you're experiencing is always helpful, right? But two, I think when, and maybe you can speak into this, Patrick, I think as humans, anything that we're going to go through that's hard, it's helpful to know a little bit of what we're about to experience.
Yeah.
So for an addict to be able to say, hey, to another addict, hey, this might be what you're going to experience the first 3 to 6 months. It might not be exact, but some, variation on a theme here. I think someone hearing that then, when they experience that thing, they know, oh, I don't have to be, afraid of this, or this is survivable, or so-and-so told me to expect this. And so I actually know what to do about it, right? Yeah. And so that's kind of what we're hoping to do today is we really, through all of our messaging, I know we try to talk to both the addict and the betrayed partner. And a lot of what we want to do is empower the addict that, like, you really can do it. Like, you absolutely can do it. Once you get to a certain point of sobriety, it's, a choice to continue in that and to go deeper. And we really want to empower you through the hard part, the legitimately difficult part of getting into sobriety. And so you can really build the life that you want, And so any thoughts around that before we kind of jump into what they can expect?
Well, I mean, I think when you recognize, and I didn't know this until I started to get into recovery pretty early on, is it is a brain problem. I thought I was deeply flawed, right? And so when you think you're deeply flawed versus like it's a coping mechanism, like I never thought about, like I never even had that knowledge, right? So when you take a coping mechanism away, right? Let's say an unhealthy coping mechanism away, you're going to experience some sort of change because of that. So
literally physiologically, in your brain, in your body chemicals, all of those things are going to shift around. Yeah.
So, in a lot of guys' cases, or, women are now looking at pornography too, but it's like in a lot of ways you've been using this for decades, almost the majority of your adult life, right? And so, a lot of times if you think about a little kid is generally happy and they have these little meltdowns when they're hungry or tired, right? And so and then you hold them in the most positive of cases, right? You hold them, they fall asleep on your shoulder, and then they wake up and they're happy again, right? It's like, and so usually it's if they're hungry, tired, or wet because they need to be changed. Those are like the three main things for a little tiny kid. But, when you become an adult, you get exposed early, nobody talks to you about it. So then all of us go through very, very hard things in life. And so, and nobody's exempt from that. Everybody goes through it. And if your early coping mechanism starts to become, sex, well, then that's what you're always going to turn to. Your body and your brain craves familiarity. It craves it. So what you're going to find is when you shut it off and you start to get into this part of your life where you're in recovery and you're trying to do the right thing, your brain doesn't have any familiarity. So it's going to start blowing you up, you know what I mean, as far as, and you're going to really start to feel a lot of things. So I think if you just remember that, and I've used this analogy in the podcast before because it came from Charles, my therapist. He's like, your addiction is like train tracks. And so when the train goes over train tracks, they're always super shiny, right? Super, super shiny. And then over time if you get into sobriety, your day one, so the trains stop going over the train tracks, but those train tracks are still pretty shiny. So maybe it takes 10 days for rust to show up on top of them, and then 30 days for weeds to start to grow up through the railroad ties, right? But the train tracks are still there. So it's just an analogy that you got to think. And then the real deep work is when you actually end up removing the train tracks, right?
And building completely different
ones. Yeah. And building, healthy train tracks, and stuff like that. So it's just it's a process that's not going to go away right away. And most of us, even though we've experienced hard things and maybe we grieve, and nobody's saying that you're just you're soulless and you don't experience anything, but it's how you cope with experiencing those. You don't let things go as deep as maybe you're going to start to experience once you get into recovery.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of the things that people can experience. You might throw some of these. I think it's fair to call it withdrawal. So the first thing that we'll talk about is dreams and intrusive thoughts. And this is one that I think freaks out both the addict and the betrayed partner. And I totally get why. Because, with the betrayed partner, what would feel super good to us is if you go cold turkey and another image or sexual thought never enters your mind ever, right? Like that would feel really great. But that's literally just not how the brain works. When you are making new patterns and when you're shifting away from those train tracks, and when you're doing something so totally different. And so your brain is going to just pop things in because it's familiar or because it's scared or because it's trying to get another dopamine hit. There's all sorts of different reasons that it's going to be reminding you of things, and it can do that in a variety of ways. So some of the things that will come up a lot is just, I randomly had this thought, right? And maybe it's an inappropriate thought. Or I think what tends to really scare guys is when they have a dream and they're like, why did I have a dream, right? It feels really uncomfortable because dreams can be very vivid. They can feel very real, right? So we just want to normalize that. Now, we've done episodes fairly recently on the difference between arousal and lust and attraction and all these different things. And so what we're not saying that's normal and acceptable and okay is, hey, you had a thought pop in and then you sit there and then you compulsively masturbate to it and then you pull it up later, right? That's not what we're talking about. Yeah. But when you're going through, you're saying, hey, I am 2 weeks into no porn, no masturbation, and I had a dream, and I woke up and it made me feel so uncomfortable because it was very sexual in nature. That's actually a normal part of your brain processing recovery.
Yeah.
So it's actually, how do I word this? It's like, it will feel very uncomfortable, but I would like to shift that into, if you have a dream, like it's not actually a bad thing, it's scary, but it is actually a very normal part of your brain processing this new pattern. It's not a setback. It's actually just a processing step that your brain is doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, what I would encourage, and I've mentioned this to guys before, like, you're not responsible for what you dream. You're just not, and those things happen. You're also not responsible for what may pop in. Like, an intrusive thought is something that you're just kind of going about your day, and all of a sudden, bang, something's in there. Maybe it's a recollection from something from a prior, whatever that is. And so what I always encourage people to do here is, if you think about this, and it's the same thing that I talked about before, maybe in times past when you had gotten an intrusive thought, the reason it wasn't scary is maybe you would act out. So you wouldn't feel that anxiety, you wouldn't feel anything, right? And so you would act out, and right. So it was process, it was thought acting out, dopamine hit, and then you're moving on with your life. Now you've disrupted that. So the only thing you have is the intrusive thought of the dream, right? And so now you're kind of like, what do I do with this? And you're kind of running around. It's almost like if somebody took the sink out of your kitchen and you had a pot of boiling water, you didn't know where to pour it. You know what I mean? And so that's partially what's happening, is you're trying to figure out the next thing. And so what I always encourage people to do in that particular thing is talk to somebody. Now, you mentioned about couples being, struggling with this. I would never tell you to not, like, if your wife says, "Hey, do you ever have intrusive thoughts or dreams?" Tell her, right? Don't be like, "Oh no, I'm fine." But you may want to process that with somebody in your group. You may want to call them up, your partner that you're supposed to call, when you're in group, and say, "Hey, I had this last night. What do you think?" And then you go through it. Now, if your wife says, "Hey, I want to know if you have an intrusive thought," make sure you tell her.
Yeah, the check-ins have to be about agreed upon stuff for sure. Yeah,
right. But make sure that, once again, you're not responsible. And I think you had the great example. If you have an intrusive thought and then you take it and then you think about it and you fantasize about it, you turn it into a string of fantasies or something like that.
You add intentionality to it.
Yeah, then that's, then you're not. But
same thing with the dream. If you woke up and you had a dream, there's a difference between someone who has a dream and then wakes up and goes, "Ooh, I had this dream," right? And then maybe they pull it up later and do something with it, versus, "Oh my gosh, I had this dream. What does this mean about my sobriety?" And to your point, the anxiety, the shame, or the guilt that you feel is actually a reflection that you're trying to do the right thing.
That's right, yeah.
And the reason it scared you is because you're trying to do the right thing. So if you are pulling these things up for fun, that's a totally different thing. But if something pops in or you have a dream and your initial reaction is shame, guilt, or fear, then that's actually, I want you to think about that as a reflection of, hey, I'm actually trying to do the right thing, which is why those emotions came up in me. And so the more, and then I would go back and listen to the intrusive thoughts episode we did too, which I'm going to throw this out. I think it might be episode 56. I think it's in the 50s.
Okay.
But go back and listen to that, because the idea with those types of things is like not to give it power, not to give it attention, not to create a story around it. Because the automatic story, if you're trying to do the right thing, is, "Oh, I must be a bad person," or "Did this, is this some sort of weird relapse?" Right? Like, what is this happening? Right? Yeah. So. Yeah, we just want to clarify that that is actually a very common and very normal thing. So I can totally see someone being 2 weeks in, doing really good, and then all of a sudden they have this image pop in that they didn't invite, they didn't, ask to come in, or they wake up and they have a really sexual dream or something like that happens. And I could see that being very, very scary and throwing them off, especially if they're doing really, really well. So I'm going to invite the reframe that those emotions actually reflect that you're trying to do the right thing.
One of the, after graduating from West Point, a consistent dream that I would have for years would be I show up to formation in the wrong uniform, right? So it's all about somehow being caught, in trouble. And then I started to have these dreams that from when I was flying, that I had a check ride and I wasn't ready, right? So I'd be and so some of my dreams now are I relapsed, right? And then I have to figure out how I'm going to tell you. So, and occasionally in my case, they've been a little bit like, whoa, that's weird. Like there's nothing that there's visual, but it's just this notion of like relapsing. And so in my case, as I process through that, I'm like, I have this like fear in my life that I'm going to be back in these situations where
you're out of
I'm
control,
non-compliant or out of control.
Yeah.
And so it's probably just a theme that I work through in my head, over my life experiences, you know what I mean?
Well, and
stuff like that.
a point that I wanted to make too. When we sleep, what we're doing is our brain is processing our day and our life. And it's literally trying to file away and make sense of our memories, our feelings, our experiences. And so again, that's why I want to reiterate, this is actually a normal part of withdrawal, because what your brain is now trying to process is this reality that the coping mechanism doesn't exist.
That's right.
So it is trying to make sense of what's happening in your life. But I think it's always important to remember you're a human being that gets to make choice. So there's nothing, no dream, no intrusive thought, no nothing that can quote unquote make you relapse.
Right.
Like everybody gets to choose how this goes for them.
Right.
Okay, the second thing that is very common, I would venture to guess everybody experiences this in one way or another. And I think there are much more extreme examples. And then there are more moderate examples where people are maybe like, is this what's happening? And that is just unfamiliar or uncomfortable emotions.
Right.
So we've shared your experience was very like odd because it wasn't like you had these anger outbursts, which by the way, some people can have it as the brain chemicals are shifting around. They may actually get really excitable or angry or have outbursts. Does not make it right or excusable, but that may be part of the brain chemicals balancing. And so just, again, be aware, be one of the things that we talk about over and over and over with recovery. One of the biggest things is to daily check in with how am I feeling? Because again, we're human beings. We get to be aware. We get to be present in our bodies and understand and put words and names to what is happening, as opposed to just, being these things are happening to me. Like I actually get to have a say in what's happening. And one of the ways that I do that is by being aware of what's happening and naming it. So that's really important. But I think some people will have more tendency towards anger, but yours was like this vague sense of like emptiness.
Yeah.
And I wonder actually now if you felt that same feeling, maybe if you would word it differently. I don't know if you
could. I hear this from a lot of guys. I'll hear anxiety. I'll hear anxiety is like a really, really big one. And to your point, I don't know if I would have identified anxiety. I think I identified anxiety more with you. You're like, I have a lot of anxiety. I'm like, yeah, that's your thing. You know what I mean? Because I just didn't, I didn't have it. And I remember it was probably 6 months, 8 months, a year or whatever, where I started to voice, hey, I have anxiety. Right. And so I just remember feeling like listless.
Pause for a second, because I want to clarify something you just said in case it's helpful. You literally before, while you were an active addict, did not believe that you had anxiety.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But, if you think about it.
That's like a really big.
Well, it's because I never allowed myself to have anxiety.
Right.
And here's the thing. I probably did. You know what I mean?
Oh, you for sure did.
Yeah.
You were just medicating it.
Right. And so, but
there's no way you didn't with the things you experienced.
I'll see a lot of tears through that first month, 6 weeks out of folks, and that's pretty normal because that's just it's an emotion that's coming up that maybe they haven't experienced. They're kind of starting to understand the problem. But, also, in those emotions, we just, as a therapist will use the feelings wheel. I always highly, 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 highly encourage the faster scale. We've talked about that multiple times. This is a really great time to get in there and in depth start identifying and there's the cool thing with the feelings wheel can be, to me, the feelings wheel was a little hard. What was easier for me on the faster scale is they would be like drinking too much coffee. You know what I mean?
Give specific examples.
And I was like, oh, I drink a lot of coffee. Now today I drink a lot of coffee too, but it's just different, right? You know what I mean? But at that moment I was like, okay, what's happening? Or the desire to spend money. Or, you're speeding up, you're making
yourself busy in life.
Yeah, you're making yourself super busy. And so, once again, it's like the brain is trying to find now a spot because you took away its coping mechanism. And so it's giving you these signals. It's saying, hey, I'm anxious. Hey, I'm feeling empty. And you're not doing anything about it. So it's like, what do I do? You know? And so all those feelings are super normal. And we want to sit in them. We want to sit there.
And I think it is important to know that will be different for every person. Everybody has like tendencies, right? Some people might have tendencies towards anger. Some people might have tendencies towards more depression, right? So like, especially if your dopamine is a little bit of a happy hormone or a happy neurochemical. So like if that's lowering as it balances out into a normal place. But if you're used to it being like excessively high, you might feel like a little depressed, a little low in the moods. You might feel really, sad, to your point, people crying more, or you might feel more overwhelmed. There's a balanced level of dopamine that helps people focus, helps people feel motivated. So there's all these ways that like as these chemicals shift, they might drop before they actually balance out well. Right. And so just to kind of be aware, your body's going to go through this transition and, all of these things are very normal. And again, I think the more aware you are using tools like you're saying, the faster scale, the feelings wheel, checking in, talking about it out loud, making sure you are a grown adult who is checking in and like naming what is happening. That's very important because otherwise you're going to be taken off guard and that's immediately going to lead to relapse. So like we've talked about this, like with your emptiness feeling, almost guarantee if that was a feeling you felt before discovery, that you wouldn't have kind of really thought about it, registered it, to your point with anxiety, because you would have just gone and acted out. You would have pulled something up on the internet or looked at something or chatted with someone or whatever, right? Like that would have been the go-to. I'm bored or I feel a little empty or lonely and boom, I have this thing to go to. Yeah. But because you were aware and you were utilizing the tools, you actually told me, I don't know what this is, but I just feel a little empty today. Yeah. I just feel a little empty. And so then you didn't have to do anything. You just knew that it was there.
Yeah. Well, and there's a couple points I'd like to make here. It's like, it may actually be that you didn't always act out every time you felt a hard emotion, right? But you didn't sit there and think about that emotion. And when you do that, when you sit there and go, okay, why do I feel this way? That actually builds greater empathy towards yourself, which in turn builds greater empathy for those around you. So like, when you sit there and you go, man, why, because we're avoidant by, a lot of us are avoidant by nature, right? We go, well, I don't want to think about this. So, we talked about acting out. Maybe what you did is you went and had some beers with your friends and just didn't talk about, hey, is anything wrong? No, nothing's wrong, right? You just, like you didn't do any sort of deep work. So that, the key is to kind of sit in that. And, I was thinking about this past week when we were approaching this thing on Friday. It was really on my mind a lot because the first time you got cancer was when I was an addict, right? And so this was really on my mind a lot about like, hey, where am I on feelings? This is a major, serious thing that you don't experience every day. Mm-hmm. So this is, and I remember thinking to myself, like, it is okay to cry. It is okay to say, I'm effing scared. It is okay to go like, you know what I mean? Like, it is okay to do all that. And so like in my little journals and in my little faster scale check-ins, I was saying those things. I was like, I'm worried, I'm scared, I've got anxiety, you know what I mean? Because it's speaking the truth to the reality of how you feel. You're a human being, of course. Like which husband or which wife doesn't feel some sort of worry, anxiety, or fear when their spouse is potentially getting diagnosed with a significant disease, right? Yeah. You'd have to be an idiot, right? Well, maybe not an idiot. Maybe you're not fully healthy. Sorry, I don't want to say you're an idiot. But maybe you're not fully healthy, right? And so
you can call them a dum-dum if they don't have empathy for their partner. Yeah.
So I think the challenge is when you feel those deep emotions, allow yourself to feel them. It also teaches you another thing is you go, you know what? I can have anxiety for a week, and this is as you move into recovery, and not do anything inappropriate to soothe it.
And
look at how strong I am.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Look at how I'm able to show up for myself, for those around me, because then you build this lens of when you see somebody else, maybe another couple or your siblings or your parents or whatever, when they go through a similar thing, you go, I know what that feels like. I know what that feels like. And so it's this development of greater empathy in life, which is really a hallmark of being, in recovery and really kind of developing some extreme emotional intelligence.
Well, and totally kudos to you and the work that we've done, because I don't even know if I even thought about the concept of you relapsing this past week.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it even crossed my mind. I was not worried about it.
Right. And so, it's funny because or it's not funny, but it's like I wasn't thinking about relapsing, but I was making the connection to a massive amount of stress.
This is stress. I need to be aware.
Yeah. And what's interesting is I use my groups. I texted my groups. And what's cool for this, sometimes what we feel is like, I'm 4 years, 7 months, blah, blah, blah days, 12 seconds, 38 minutes or whatever into recovery, right? But some of the guys are like 38 days in or 6 days in or whatever. So it's okay, just because I'm that far ahead of them doesn't mean I can't rely on them. And so when you can message your folks, it allows them to show up, because then they can start to demonstrate greater empathy. And so like the whole thing kind of feeds itself. And so good people are, which generally people are. Nobody wants to hear that a couple is going through that. They want, hey, I'm really sorry. You know what I mean? And what do you need? Is there any way I can show up for you? You know what I mean? And stuff like that.
Yeah. So I think the takeaway is become aware of how you're feeling, learn how to put words to it, and then also have a process. Who do you talk to? Right. You mentioned several things. You definitely verbalized all of that to me, but then you also reached out to your group, and you were processing, journaling, writing it down. Right. So you had several mechanisms that you were utilizing that were not unhealthy mechanisms.
Right. Yep.
I think that's really important. And same thing, that with the dreams and intrusive thoughts and stuff like that is, you mentioned that too. Reach out to somebody, talk to it. It's like normalize what's happening, get some feedback. I think things always feel scarier in our heads than when we say them out loud. In terms of the dreams, the health scare probably was scary to say out loud too. But a lot of times, some of the emotions that we're feeling, we create a lot of stories and a lot of fear and a lot of stuff when we ruminate about it. And when we're able to just talk it out, then it's like, oh, that just does not seem like it holds as much weight anymore.
Right.
Okay. The third thing, which I'm sure is feels like you're going through puberty again. The third thing that you can experience through withdrawal is nocturnal emissions. So super fun experience, I'm sure. But basically, if you choose to do something like we recommend, like the 90 days of celibacy, then you're not going to be experiencing orgasm. And if you have been compulsively masturbating 1 to 2 to 3 to however many times a day or a week or whatever, your body's going to have to, again, it's like your brain, your body has to kind of figure out what to do with it. So if you're not aware ahead of time what that means, then it might kind of freak you out.
Yeah, and so here's the thing I want to make sure everybody knows. You're not going to die if you don't orgasm. If you get turned on and you don't orgasm, it's not creating some sort of health problem. Those are stupid things that guys say to women.
You're on a roll today.
Yeah. So it's just
let it out, Patrick. Let it out.
No, you're going to be fine. Now, here's the deal. Like in my case, I can't remember if I had a nocturnal. I might have.
I think you might have like a couple of times.
Yeah, but
like
then
maybe in the first 90 days or something.
Yeah. You may find that you're like standing there going to the bathroom, and all of a sudden you're like, what's that in the toilet? And like something comes out. It's, your body will take care of it. You know what I mean? And you're not going to die. You're not going to shrivel up. You're not going to whatever. All the dumb things that people say.
Should I share my story about my sex education from when I was a kid? Yeah. So I was telling Patrick the other day, and I hope this language doesn't offend anyone, but I was telling Patrick the other day that my sex education didn't really come from my parents. It came
Shocking.
It came from, I love my parents, but that
wasn't
wasn't their mode of expertise. Yeah. But my sister's very close friend decided that I needed some sex education. And so they like sat me in the back of her car, and she just like started telling me all of these things. And one of the things that she told me is she was like, more or less, she's like, don't worry about blue balls. If someone claims blue balls, you don't have to do anything about it. It is not your responsibility. They will be fine. It might hurt them, but they will be fine. And you don't let anybody pressure you to do anything about it. And I don't know why that particular, because I think she told me a bunch of other stuff, but like that for whatever reason, like stuck in my brain. And good for her for telling me that. I don't know if it was the, best age that she told me. But obviously it like stuck in my head. So that's kind of what we're saying here. Like you will not die. There may be a period where it will be uncomfortable, but you, just like your partner, do not have to do anything about that. It will be okay. What your body does is it either releases it naturally or it absorbs it right back up into the body. So like you actually don't have to do anything.
I know, and I've brought this up a couple times. Like I'll be in the shower or whatever, and sometimes you're washing and all of a sudden you're like, whoa. Uh-oh, what's going on? And to me, what's happened in my life is I will almost find it funny because I'm like, what's happening down there? You know what I mean? Like you do have nerve endings. Those things are still at play. Like your sensitivity is not dead.
Even
right?
just
and
the way your body works, your blood flows down into that area. And
that's
so
right.
I think there's something like men will have a natural erection about 5 times throughout the night because the body is pushing blood into that area. And if it didn't do that, it would actually be unhealthy for the organ. So like I think there's natural stuff that happens that you just don't need to do anything about. You don't need to worry about it. You don't need to put an interpretation on it. Yeah. It's kind of like the emotion. It's like, okay, where did this come from? Oh, well, I think it just happened. I wasn't fantasizing. I wasn't touching it. I wasn't, for the purpose of pleasure, whatever. Like, so I think that's where it's like, okay, then just move on.
Yeah. And just for the partners too that have been betrayed, if he has a nocturnal emission and he hasn't been doing anything, there's been no stimulation, he just wakes up. He didn't do anything wrong. It just happened. You know what I mean?
It's a normal thing, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just,
actually honestly a good thing.
It's just the body.
It's actually for like a betrayed partner, I feel like that can be a good sign in a lot of ways that like something isn't happening and the body is sort of, I think it can be reassuring in a little.
Yeah.
Not that if somebody, because maybe if somebody doesn't have that, maybe their body's just absorbing it. So don't go home and be like, hey, you had one. But yeah, I think like when that happens, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It actually can be a good thing that it's like, oh, okay, nothing, like it's not being released in another way. Right. And so this is kind of a reassurance that like, hey, the body's kind of processing through. Mm-hmm. And I will say like over time, as your body balances out, that too ebbs away. It's not, I guess I shouldn't say because maybe everybody would be a little bit different, but a lot of the times, like your body's going to sort of like reset, and so
it's going to equalize.
Yeah. So most of the time, if that's going to happen, it's probably going to be in the first, 3 to 6 months that you'd kind of experience that, and then as you kind of balance back out, yeah. Okay, and then I think the last one that we're going to talk about today is this desire to shift the sexual energy that was being expressed, and maybe I shouldn't say sexual energy, but it could be sexual energy. It could be, but I think just the desire to shift the energy that needs to be, that feels uncomfortable, the uncomfortable energy, like we were talking about earlier, the emotions, the desire to shift those into other areas. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes what you'll see is I'm doing really great. I'm not looking at pornography. I'm not compulsively masturbating, but maybe now you're seeing that it is shifting into, but I am eating a lot of ice cream, or I am drinking a little too much, or I am wanting to spend a lot of money, or I'm buying a lot of Lego. Things that, or, whatever it might be. Can you think of some other ideas?
I mean, there's shopping. There's all kinds of different ones. But I think. Oh, sorry, I don't want to cut you off. What I was going to say is, the underlying emotion does not change. The emotion is there. It's gonna be there. The anxiety is gonna be there. So if you shift, and a lot of times they will say this when you're going through early recovery, is like, hey, you might want to really moderate your alcohol consumption because that is a numbing agent. And so, but here's the thing: it's if you were numbing deep anxiety with pornography, and then you stop pornography, if you think about it from the faster scale example that we're giving, and you shift to another thing like shopping or working out or excessive working out or alcohol, that anxiety is still going to be there. So the important key thing to do is to keep working those feelings,
right,
and understand what's happening there. And because it's always like this is the challenge. This is where it becomes we've talked a lot about being authentic, right? So here's a good example. If hopefully this will help. So you always go on a ski trip with your buddies, right? So you're 6 months into recovery, and when you and your buddies go on a ski trip, and you end up drinking a lot. So you're on a ski trip with your buddies, and you just you end up maybe drinking more than you would, but it's a fun time. It's connected, and it's all that stuff. The way I would view that is like, I think you're okay. The difference is let's say you never drank beer on Sundays watching the NFL, and all of a sudden you're a week in and you're polishing off 6 beers every Sunday, or every time there's a football game on. That's a complete shift in your behavior that's taking in that. So the whole point is, what you're trying to do this is, it's like they always say, you don't really heal until you become more self-aware. So you're trying to improve your self-awareness, and so if you're numbing, then you're not really gaining that self-awareness. So, and it's also okay, like if you make a mistake, like, maybe your habit was always like you had 1 drink on Sundays, and then one Sunday you're like, oh, shoot, I had 4. Ooh, what does that mean? What's going on there? Do I need to?
And your partner may bring that up.
Yeah,
too,
your partner may bring it up.
Because one thing that partners will look for is patterns. They're especially once as you're getting into recovery, and a lot of like safety and trust is kind of new. One thing that can be really destabilizing for a partner is kind of being like, wait a second, this looks like a different pattern, or something's different, or I can associate maybe that with addictive patterns. Is this energy going to a new thing? That sort of thing. So like, try not to get upset if your partner brings that up, because they're also coming from a place of fear because of what has happened, and wanting to bring it up because they care about you, and also they want to feel safe. Yeah.
Well, and you had, and we've talked about this before, is you would put up this thing saying, hey, no more than 2 drinks. I wanted to know. And at the time,
in the beginning, you agreed because you thought, I don't know if alcohol will be a thing for me. And I don't want to have another addiction. And so, and then we've moved through where it's.
Yeah. But it was really important because I didn't know, based on what you just said, I did not know what my tendencies were going to be. I was very concerned about that.
Right.
And so I wanted to heal as a whole human. And so I was like, hey, we're going to do this. But then I think it's
always best to do the most conservative option if something is in question.
Correct.
So be more careful than less careful up front. Because if you can be more careful for the initial several months, you're going to just create a stronger foundation of sobriety. Because if you can do that, then you can really do anything. Yeah. But if you did like the easiest version, then you've kind of slowed down the process. If you do the hardest version up front, then okay, well then you've done that and you can do it.
Right. And if overspending's your thing, you can put a boundary in there that says, hey, we're going to talk over a certain particular spending of a dollar limit. It's $50 or $75 or $200 or whatever that is. No booking big trips without us talking about it, or what I mean, and stuff like that. So there's just it's the awareness, because it can shift.
Well, I think that is the key. This whole thing, recovery, is about making conscious choices, because you get to be in control of your life. Right. Life is not out here making these decisions for you. But that's what it feels like when you've been an addict. It's like, well, I don't know what happened. And this thing just happened. And life just happened to me. And then I ended up here. That's sometimes, some of the verbiage that people can use. And I'm going to kind of poo-poo that a little bit and go, no, there was choice here. It was less conscious. You were making a lot of unconscious choices. And what we're advocating is that you become a conscious being who makes conscious choices every day. And you are fully capable of doing that. Yeah. So that's what we're saying. And what we're talking about is giving you the tools to do that. You just have to take action on those tools. But the whole idea of recovery is like, and I think you would agree, Patrick, like you and I kind of walk through life going, I'm in control of the choices that I make. Right. No one can make them for me. No emotion is going to make them for me. I get to make choices. Things happen in life. we just went through a bunch of stress that we didn't have control over, but we did have control how we responded. And you gave some examples of healthy choices that you chose to make because you brought all of the emotions into your conscious and then you made choices based on that.
Yeah.
And so I think that is like the key. If you can't say, yes, I am aware of things that happen in my life, I'm able to name them, and then I make conscious, aware decisions about what to do about that, then that's the work that we're encouraging you to do.
You know, when you go through this process of really starting to feel your emotions, it is hard. It is really, really hard. And like we said, there was the emptiness and the disconnect that I felt. There's anxiety that I've seen a lot of guys do, extreme sadness, hopelessness, feeling lost and stuff. The one thing I want to make sure that makes this process easier is your body is a system. And the better you can feed it, and the better you can rest it, and the better that you can move it, really makes your ability to handle these things that much better. So, they say in The Conqueror that if you eat junky food, you have a junky brain. And so if you're thinking you're trying to heal your brain, and so, it may feel really, really good to go eat Taco Bell every day at lunchtime. And trust me, I really used to eat a lot of Taco Bell. Yeah. So, but you got to remember what those things are doing to you. So, to your point, if it's ice cream at night, with a soda and all of these different things, all those sugar and all those different things in there, really evaluate your diet. If you used to work out, as an addict and you stop, well, evaluate that now is how do you get moving again? You know what I mean? How do you get out there and get some really healthy habits going to support your body? It's because it is going to become easier to manage as your body is more balanced.
Are literally going to help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And I would say also too, just with this whole idea of, the emotions are uncomfortable, do not shy away from that, because it's like any other addiction. It's like you've got to at some point rip the Band-Aid off. The more you try to avoid the discomfort in the beginning, the longer your recovery process is. We don't want that for you. We acknowledge that it is uncomfortable. Just like any other difficult thing in life, if you're training for a marathon and you do a couch to 5K, those first couple of weeks are just horrid. It's just not comfortable. And you get all the sore muscles and you're like, I can barely waddle, much less run my thing for the day, right? Like, we get it. And we're not saying or sugarcoating that that's not uncomfortable. But I will say, the longer you avoid facing that and learning a healthy way to deal with it, the more those emotions are going to come up. So you're not really doing yourself any favors. Like, you're just extending the period of time that you're going to feel these things, as opposed to helping your body move through it. So I would expect the discomfort to rise in the beginning. But what we're hoping is that we're giving you tools that you choose to use to do something when those things come up. And so I think that would be like the good wrapping up point, is what are some of the things to do when you feel the most uncomfortable? I want you to pause, and I literally want you to do breathing exercises, because if you can breathe, then you are already in control of your body. And if you are in control of your body, then you're in control of everything else. It also will help your heart rate calm down. So if you start to feel that shame, that guilt, that fear, that anxiety, that overwhelm, whatever the negative emotion is, that worry that, I'm going to go act out, or I'm worried about that I'm going to go act out, or what does this mean about me? Whatever it is, if you can breathe, it's going to help you. And so one of the easiest ways to do that is the box breathing. You breathe in for 4 counts, you hold at the top for 4 counts, you breathe out for 4 counts, and then you hold again. And you just repeat 4, 4, 4, 4 until your heart rate calms down. At that point, you can take a new assessment. How am I feeling now? Do I still feel the same emotions? I would imagine if your body has calmed down, things have shifted a little bit. You've moved the energy a little bit. And that can really reinforce, like, I actually do have control over what happens. I have control over how I respond. I can actually mitigate some of these responses and say, I am safe, I am okay, I am in control. And so breathing can be really good. And that's just one breathing exercise, but absolutely Google them. There's others. You can breathe in for 4, breathe out for 6. All of these are just controlling your breath, leading to a lower heart rate, leading to feeling more calm, and which of course is going to allow you to feel more present and able to make choices. Grounding. So this is where, you can literally ground, or you put your feet on the bare feet on the ground outside and sort of connect to nature. But you can also do grounding exercises, which is like, I'm going to specifically look around the room for things that are green, or I'm going to count how many things I see. It's like literally breaking, choosing like what your brain is focusing on and breaking the pattern from what it's ruminating about or what's happening right now. So those are some other options, or doing some grounding exercises in the middle of some of these uncomfortable emotions. Patrick also mentioned, I'll let you say it one more time, Patrick. It's your favorite
journaling.
thing. Get it out. Let it out on the page, whatever you're feeling. The thing about journaling is it drops into your subconscious when you just let it flow, and it ends up being a free flow. I always forget what that word is when you just write without thinking.
Journaling.
There's a word for it. Yeah. Okay. We'll just call it journaling for today. But
it's called awesome journaling is what it's called.
Anyway, but that can really help too. By the time I would go until you feel the emotion has moved through. And if that seems like a long time, keep going. If it's too long, then maybe pause on the journaling, go outside, take a walk. Sometimes removing yourself from the environment in which you're feeling the emotion, walking through a doorway, getting a different environment can help. And then the last thing that I would mention, and we just talk about all the time, is connection. Talking to other human beings. But the key here is that you're honest with what you're experiencing and that you're brave by being vulnerable in your share. So if you call and then you try to sugarcoat what you're experiencing, or you're not being honest about what you're feeling, then that's a false connection. It's not going to be helpful. But if you practice vulnerability by saying, I need help, I'm struggling, or can you sit with me while this emotion passes through me, or what are some things that have helped you, or whatever that conversation might look like, but being really honest and choosing, and this is a choice because it's scary. You have to choose vulnerability. Nobody likes vulnerability. It's one of probably the most uncomfortable, especially when we're talking about things that are embarrassing. But we have to choose vulnerability, and that's why the support groups are there. That's why your accountability partner is there. And so we have to be honest, because they can only help you. And this goes for coaches, practitioners, therapists too. They can only support you to the extent that you come to them with truth.
One of the things I want to weigh in on the connection piece is you need to, and you mentioned about practicing it. I would even take it a step further and make sure, let's say in your early recovery, that you have committed to call somebody if you're on the verge of relapse. I will tell you that probably 9 out of 10 times you're not going to make that call because you haven't been practicing it. So here's a good example. You have one good friend that you talk to that you've committed to call if you feel like you're going to relapse. What is actually a better way to do it is to say, I'm going to talk to that friend every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And whether I'm activated, whether I'm anxious or not, I'm going to talk to that person every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 5 o'clock, and we're going to talk real briefly. And he's going to ask me, hey, how you doing? How you been feeling? And that sort of thing. So you're getting into that mindset, that positive habit mindset when you're not in crisis. And then when you get into crisis, it's going to be easier to make that call. So, this is a, once again, you're starting to establish new brain patterns. So if you establish that Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, whatever, your brain craves familiarity. So then when you come into having an issue, the familiar process for you is to reach out to that person, as opposed to saying, I'm going to do something totally new that I've never done before, which is going to reach out to somebody when I'm a massive activation and thinking about doing something that I always thought was going to be a secret and take to my grave. Like, it doesn't make any sense, right? So you gotta practice what you're going to end up exercising in a time of crisis.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. Anything else about any of these things that are, as you're going through sobriety and hopefully moving towards recovery, just some of the things you can expect, or some of the things that any encouragement you'd want to leave people with that first 3 to 6 months, right? This newness.
Yeah. Being, feeling emotions is a human thing. It's no secret that we're Christ followers, but if you read the Gospels, you see where Jesus experienced deep emotion. He cried so hard that he bled. Having deep emotions are
it's a gift.
It's a gift. It's really part of who we are as humans. And so, substance abuses or process addictions, they've kind of robbed us of that of that ability to feel those deep emotions. And that's part of the human experience. And, you know, I've always said this before, it's like, you know, I remember thinking that once I got over my addiction, life would be easy. And nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, there's a lot of tough things that happen in life, and they hurt and they suck and they scare you, and it's deeply painful, but you get to experience that because that's part of the human experience. And so don't be ashamed of it. Don't be afraid of it. Understand that that's going to come up, and you're absolutely going to feel it.
Yeah.
And it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. And I think that reframing it as a gift is really important because the deeper emotions you feel are going to allow people to witness you and see you for who you are more realistically. And that allows you to connect with people who love you, see you, value you, all these things that we need as human beings. That's what connection is I see you in your pain. I see you in your happiness. I see you in all of your phases of life, and I accept you for who you are, and I love you through all of it. That's connection. And so if we hide that from people or from ourselves, we don't get to experience any of the good parts. And I think that's the deeper you can feel negative emotions is directly correlated to the more you can feel happiness and joy. They're what do you call that? Inversely related or directly correlated, where if you can't feel deep sadness, you also most of the time can't feel deep happiness because then maybe you are numbing a little bit. So the more we are capable of feeling the extremes is actually a good thing, because on the opposite extreme is all the goodness as well. And so we don't want to deprive ourselves of that in this life, because then we're missing out on all the good parts.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, thank you for listening. And again, thank you so much for thinking of us this week. It was definitely a stressful week. And our animals were going through it. We were going through it. The ultrasound was rescheduled. It was a whole lot of stuff. So we appreciate that people were caring and thinking. And I'm going to close a couple loops here in case anybody was like, there's an open loop here that did not get closed last week. My nephew is okay. I had mentioned in our last episode, I was like, we came home and he was in the hospital. He is fine. So thank goodness I did not clarify that in the last episode. I just, in case that was on anybody's mind, he's good. I'm good. The cat is actually good. Coco is mostly good, but we're kind of working through some things there. But overall, all good. So thank you so much for caring about us and for loving us and for listening every week. We really appreciate you. Every day is a new opportunity to choose health and freedom. Make that choice today, and we will see you next week. Woohoo! If you're listening to this, it means you've made it through an entire episode. Part of recovery is spending time engaging in healing and self-growth activities. We are thankful that you chose our podcast to be one of those activities today. Make sure you reward yourself for that accomplishment. If you've enjoyed this episode or this podcast, we would love to hear from you. Please take just a few moments to leave a rating and review, letting us know your experience with Recover You. We not only love hearing how these episodes are helpful, but ratings and reviews help others just like you who are searching for recovery information and support find the podcast too. We can't wait to hear from you. See you next week.